Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Joe. Welcome back to another episode of the Inside Our Phillies podcast. A special episode today on this Friday, as we have Jeremy, but we also have Matt Gelb. How are you doing today, Matt?
Hey guys, good morning.
Good
I'm
morning.
sorry.
Glad
I'm
we.
sorry for sounding the way I sound. I am coming over a cold from one of my children before I head back to Florida next week for the last week of spring training.
You're picking a good time to go back to Florida. You were here for like the fake spring, fake summer almost, and
Yes,
you'll be back to the warmth again.
yeah, it's cold again. I'm not very happy about it. And my daughter even yesterday was like, "We're never going to make it to spring," and I told her, I feel you. I feel you right now."
It's rough to go
Uh,
from 80 degrees to snowing within 24 hours, but alas,
that is crazy.
such is the Philadelphia area. Cool. Well, we have a lot of questions for you today. Some are our questions, some are some user submitted questions, um, and looking forward to getting into it. Um,
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me.
yeah, looking forward to it. First one that I have is what made you want to go into journalism, and then what specifically made you want to cover the Phillies specifically? Like, why not cover basketball or football or something else?
I mean, I think my path to journalism is not unlike many who are in sports writing. I loved sports growing up as a kid. I played a lot of different sports as a kid. I wasn't very good when I played hockey, baseball, uh, you know, even some golf. You know, was never going to be a professional, but I loved being around sports, and I loved to write when I was in middle school and high school, and um, I think the idea of combining those two passions, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, was such a novelty. And I worked when I was 16. I worked Friday nights for a little paper in Montgomery County called the Lansdale Reporter, and often I would just be in the office taking phone calls, like taking score calls from football coaches across the area and just taking down some information and whatever. But they would let me go out every now and then to go cover a game. And the first time I saw my name in print in a published piece, a professional newspaper, a professional outlet, there was just such a rush. Like it was so cool. And on top of that, they paid me like $20 for it. And I remember a teacher in high school being like, "That's pretty cool. Like you had fun doing it, and they paid you to do it. Like, don't you think this is something that you might want to pursue?" And she was right. And I mean, I've been very lucky. I mean, I had some really good internships when I was in college. Um, I had a few things go my way in terms of getting into the door at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I had interned with them, and the paper was going into bankruptcy, and their two baseball writers, Jim Salisbury and at the time Andy Martino, had both left the paper, and I was covering high school sports at the Inquirer. And the editor at the time was like, he knew that I liked baseball. He knew that I was, at least somewhat knowledgeable about baseball at the time, and he didn't have many other options. I was 23, and he said, "Do you want to go to spring training?" And I said, "Yeah." And you know, uh, they sent me to spring training in 2010, uh, and then halfway through the spring, two of the editors flew down and they offered me the full time job covering the Phillies, and I'm really grateful for that because um, I don't know if I would have picked staying at home. I mean, I don't think I ever envisioned. I grew up in the area. I grew up in Chalfont. I went to high school at CB West. Um, I love it here, but I don't think in my wildest dreams, that I would be, staying here right away at least, and having a job at the paper I grew up reading and covering one of the most popular teams in the area, and having that, um, coming into the Phillies at a time when they were, coming off back to back, a World Series and a National League championship, and um, it's crazy how it worked out. I'm really lucky that I got the opportunity, and I still love covering the sport. Um, even though I feel like I've written the same version of some stories all the time, there's still different stories and different things and different people to write about, and I truly do love it.
That's awesome. So you grew up a Phillies fan? Like I know you're a big Sixers fan, but I didn't know like
I
you grew up in the area and you at least grew up as a Phillies fan too.
I did not grow up as a Phillies fan,
Really?
which is one of my deep dark secrets that I think some people have figured this out. Um, I actually grew up a Mets fan in suburban Philadelphia. Um, and I actually some of the
Heresy.
some of the first times that I uh, was published online, really, like I was writing for a Mets blog when I was 14, 15, 16, um, and it was sort of my gateway, I think, into writing about baseball. And obviously now, once I started covering the Phillies, I will tell you that people would always ask, "Well, you're a Phillies fan." It's like, well, no, I cover the Phillies. Um, I'm no longer a Mets fan. I'm not a Phillies fan. I generally am a fan of quick games, which before the pitch clock era, that used to be a big deal. Now most of the games are within a pretty set range of time. Um, I'm a fan of good stories, and that could mean a lot of different things. Some people will ask, well, what I'm not a fan of is like an 81 and 81 team, because generally that means that they've just been average or mediocre, and maybe there was an interesting arc that got them to that 81 record. But usually I'm a fan of really, really, really good teams and really, really bad teams, because I think the stories are just naturally more interesting. Um, and I know, especially in Philadelphia, like there's definitely look like there's more people reading me when the Phillies are good. Like there's no question about that. I think there's more attention, there's more interest. So does that benefit me? Probably. But I also know the people of Philadelphia well, and they love to. They can't look away from a car crash, right? And you know, sometimes when the Phillies are really, really bad, there's a lot of people who are interested in reading and still reading, and I think that speaks to the passion of the fan base, and just how interested people are in this franchise, no matter what is going on. And I always say this. I said it yesterday when I went on Effectively Wild. The Phillies are never not interesting.
Been that way for a long time, right? How
I
about you,
think
Jeremy?
so.
What do you have? What do you have, Jeremy, on for the next question?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would say the only time they ever not been interesting was like 2013. That was just
That was a tough season. 2014 was the year that kind of drove me off baseball, and I had just met my now wife. I had met her in 2014 during the season, and I really liked her. And with the baseball
I would hope
job,
so.
like yeah, with the baseball job is it can be hard. It was hard. Finding relationships and making them strong. And that 2014 team was rough. It was a bad clubhouse. It was a lot of guys who knew that the end was coming, and the front office knew that the end was here. And it was a rough year. It was my fifth year covering the team, and all of that combined prompted me to ask for a transfer. I actually went over to the Inquirer's Metro desk for a year, a little more than a year, covering news in the city. I'm covering courts and crime and all kinds of stuff that I never thought I would be doing. Um, so that 2014 team to me was, maybe there was more interest than that year than 2013, but I feel like 2014 was just, that was just I don't know. Everybody knew it was over.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
oh yeah.
sense.
I mean, 2013 you had the amazing Dominic Brown May,
Yeah, yeah.
that which is just the most fascinating, hilarious month I feel in recent Phillies history. Uh, but to go based off that, like how did your interactions with the team differ, like from that Clintac Kapler era, like this the bad, like even the right before that, the Sandberg, even to like when they started getting good again.
I mean, different. I mean, like when I first started covering a team, I mean, was a very established group of writers covering them. I mean, many of them are still covering them. Todd Lucky and Jim Salisbury, who are two, really, really, really good friends of mine. Jim, I consider to be my mentor. I think Jim is a true pro and so good at what he does, and uh, they had very good relationships with Ruben Amaro Jr. and many people in that front office. And um, I was kind of the punk kid who might have been trying to look at the game in a different way. And I'm not saying that I was totally influenced by Moneyball, but it certainly opened my eyes. I mean, I think when you read the book and you start then digesting, um, new statistics and new ways of thinking about things, I think that was the perspective I was trying to bring into the beat when I was younger because I knew that I didn't have the sources or the relationships that Salisbury or Zalecki did. Um, I had to attack it from a different way, and naturally, I think and it's funny now because I consider myself, um, quite friendly with Ruben Amaro Jr. But back in the day, we were not. I mean, he looked at me as I think this punk kid because I think I was trying to challenge them to think about things in different ways. And I think that even if you ask Ruben now, I think he would admit that they were probably a little too hard headed about some of the changes that were happening in the sport, and the Phillies were reluctant to change. So when I come back onto the beat in 2016, and the Phillies have hired Matt Klentak, and they're starting to uh, make a considerable amount of changes into the way that the club operates. I think my interactions were easier then, especially because like everybody could tell. I mean, we knew that look, they weren't going to be competitive for quite a bit of time, and I think I enjoyed at the time like writing more of these stories about franchise, the front office changing and the culture changing and their ideas changing. And I kind of look back at some of those stories now and I'm like, I don't know why I enjoyed those because I think it was glorifying a lot of the things that we've come to realize are just not. I don't know how to say this. I mean, we were glorifying efficiency, right? Which is great, I think. But I don't know that fans necessarily care that much about efficiency or well run front offices or um, building analytics departments. Like I think those stories were novelties at the time because the Phillies had not done any of that stuff. Um, but I think what I really uh, came to enjoy was yes, when they started to get good again he was telling the stories of the people on the field. And like I think that's the one thing that I try not to lose sight of is that and I feel like I'd like to think that this has helped me is that like covering professional athletes can be intimidating. It can be, you can put some of these guys on a pedestal, but honestly, what I've come to really appreciate is that these guys are people like just like us and like typically like we look for answers is like why is this happening to a guy, why is he struggling, why is he doing this, why is that, and there are numbers and different things and trends that can help us understand that, but mainly like it might just be that the guy is having a typical human emotion that maybe you or I might have and that he's having a tough time at home or he's not confident. Like I don't want to distill it down to that, but like these guys are humans and they just so happen to be performing and working every day in front of hundreds of thousands of people in person and on TV. And I think the more and more you view these guys as humans and capture the human side of 9 innings every night, I think that's helped me really see baseball, and it really helped me see that rise in 2022 because it was so cool to see the city kind of fall in love with baseball again. And I think um, part of that was falling in love with a lot of the people, uh, around the team, whether it was the players, the coaches, the manager. Um, and I really enjoyed telling those stories.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So
I mean, well, so sorry, no, but I think it's yeah. I don't know. I think constantly drafting skinny 6'3", 5 tool players would eventually worked out.
So much.
So, how does like the process work when you're writing on a big story? Like the Castellanos story is like I think like the most recent like kind of huge story that you worked on. Like, how does something like that come together, and like what is the process like from like start to finish?
Yeah, I mean that one was uh, certainly a different one. I mean, I think it started essentially with a challenge, which was, I was not in Miami for that series in June, when at least when the beer incident happened. And when the team came home and I was at the ballpark, I started asking some people, hey, what happened? Like, what did he say? Because he was just, they said he was benched for inappropriate comments. And like in my mind, I am like, everybody's asking me the question. They're like, fans or friends are like, what the heck did he say? And so in my mind, like that is the number one question. I need to find out what he said or what happened. And everybody around the team, players, coaches, everybody, front office was like, you will never know what happened. I said, okay. And I kind of viewed that as a challenge, because it's my job to know what's going on. And, sometimes if there's something that's going on and I can't, I need to at least know what's going on. And sometimes I can report it, sometimes I can't. Sometimes I need to get more sourcing on it to make sure that it's nailed down. And I think that was this Castellanos story, is that the more people I talked to over the course of the summer as I tried to figure out what was going on, it's like I mean, some of this I knew at the time, but I started seeing more things and hearing more things and realizing more things that, like, there's a bigger story here, right? And as Castellanos started to lose playing time, it became even more evident that there was a bigger thing happening here. Is that there were some real issues, and some of it wasn't publicly known. It wasn't hidden that Nick Castellanos and Rob Thompson did not get along, but it went certainly way deeper than that. And I think that was what, over the course of the summer and then into September and October, I'm just collecting different things, and the more and more people I talked to said yes, like you're onto something, and like, but a lot of guys, would not talk to me even anonymously, uh, if there wasn't a condition, which is that uh, some of what we were talking about could not be published until either Castellanos was traded or released. And the more and more I came to report was that, and I wrote it soon after the season was over, was that he would not be back. I mean, they had made a decision, um, you know, pretty consciously, not too long after the playoffs, that he would not be back. And I think that started, a lot of my reporting came in October and November, when, I'm reaching out to different people to try to get a clearer picture. And this was a tough story because, like, it needed to be airtight, right? And it needed to be fair. Like, I don't think this was all on Nick Castellanos, and I hope that was clear in the story. Is that, like, I don't think anybody should be coming out of this looking good. Like, I don't think the Phillies handled things very well, and a lot of players had that feeling, had that sentiment. I mean, I think there was a line in the story about how, like, when this was a real thing after the Miami incident, there were a lot of players who thought that Thompson and Dombrowski were letting Castellanos call shots and were not um, handling it the way that they should handle it. And I I don't think they were wrong. I mean, if that's at least what the sentiment inside the clubhouse was. And I also don't think that Nick Castellanos was wrong for feeling alienated at times, especially right when he got to Philadelphia, where he felt like he was being told everything that he was doing wrong by the coaches. And he's a different guy, and this was a complicated story with a lot of layers. And the more people I talked to, I think the more layers I found to it. And it's like, okay, this is a lot. And I held myself to as high of a standard as I could, and it wasn't perfect. But if something appeared in that story, I needed at least three different people to tell me it. And I thought that that was uh, the best way to handle it, because it needed to be accurate. It needed to be well sourced, because this was a sensitive subject. This is, um, this was a story that had to be fair. And I understand that there was a lot of people who reacted the way they did and did not think that it was fair. And I understand that. It's the nature of this kind of story. But in my mind, there had to be something, because whenever he was going to get traded or released, and all along I believed he was going to get released at some point, was that, like, he's going to get released. They're going to pay him $20 million to go away, and there has to be, the reaction from outside is going to be, what? Like, why? Why are they doing this? Obviously, he had a bad year last year, but they're just going to pay this guy to go away. And my goal is to be having a story that explains, no, this is why. Like, this is what was happening, and this is why they got to this point.
When you have like a negative story or somebody comes off poorly in a story, does that like kind of affect your ability to work with those people or get information from those people in the future? Because I agree with you. Like I think in that story, Castellanos and the Phillies, neither side really came out in a super positive light. Does that kind of impact on your
Definitely.
work in the future?
You can, and I think that's part of the job. But I think what I would say is that I've been very transparent with people. Is that um, I try to be as accountable as I can be and transparent as I can be in my reporting. And I tell guys, especially uh, when they come to the Phillies and maybe I'm developing a relationship with a player or something, I say, look, if I ever write anything or ask anything or say anything or tweet anything or whatever, and you don't agree with it or you think it's out of line or that it's bullshit, tell me. Come to me. Like, don't just like um, harbor this sort of like ill will toward me. Like, call me out on it, because I think that's only fair. Because if I'm critical of a player or a decision, uh, I think I should be held to the same standard. And I feel like that baseball players generally they like that idea, like of being able to hold someone else accountable too. And I've heard it. I mean, I've worn it before from some guys. I mean, like, and I've told guys like, don't you want to call me out, and guys have done that. And maybe I don't agree with their perspective. Maybe um, I feel like they're not in the right, but I need to give them the right to have their piece, or maybe at least rant to me about maybe something I did or said or wrote. And I think that's only fair. And I think that means being accountable, showing up, showing that you're not just parachuting in with a hot take. Accountability is just so important in toward building these relationships and being able to be critical. I think writing something negative, it works. Uh, only if you're accountable. I think that's important.
That makes sense. Um, Jeremy, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, going based on that, what was like the most challenging story slash player of your career? Was it this Castellanos story? Because how like tight they were, like weird the front office was being about it.
That's a good question. I think the Castellanos story is the story that I lost the most sleep over because it did take me a while. It did take a while, and it was very stressful to me because I wanted it to be right and I wanted it to be fair. And I don't think that Nick is the most challenging player I've ever dealt with. I mean, I think I've said this on my own podcast in Phillies Therapy that, like, I generally liked my interactions with Castellanos because he challenged me, and I enjoyed that. I'm at the point in my career where I've heard all the cliches. I've heard every baseball cliche. I've heard it all. I kind of like that he was a different cat, and I don't necessarily agree with his tact sometimes, and that's fine. But he made me. I think he made me a better reporter because I had to be prepared for interviews with him. You had to ask better questions, questions that were not yes or no questions. Like, he makes you realize it's like, oh, that was a stupid thing that I just asked this guy. Why did I ask that? And the thing is, if you came to him prepared and came to him with uh, a substantive question, he gave you an insightful answer. Like, he really did. And like, that's what I appreciated. And I loved during the 2022 playoffs, like going up to Castellanos after a big game, not even a big game by him, but like a big win by the Phillies, and he just had this wonderful perspective. I feel like on all of it, and I really did like that. Obviously, at the end, things got somewhat contentious, and I think that mirrored what was going on with him and his teammates too. So I don't think he was the most challenging player. I would say that the most challenging player was probably Jonathan Papelbon. If I was older when Papelbon came to, and I was covering the Phillies and Papelbon came, I think it would have been easier for me. I took things too personally. I think when Papelbon was with the Phillies, and I think it was a good lesson for me. He was tough. He was tough. Uh, but I think he
Yeah,
taught me a lot of different things.
Trial by fire, I
you
guess.
could
At that
say he's a
point.
real. Yeah, you could say he's a real like crotch grabber.
So, kind of on the more positive side, like, are there any like players who, in your opinion, in your career, like, have really kind of stood out to you in terms of like their willingness to work with you or give you good bites, or like what players do you like kind of remember most fondly working with?
It's a good one. When I first started covering the team, Jason Worth was one of the first guys that, and it was his last year at the Phillies, and I don't know why. Um, I don't know why he liked me, and we've maintained a good relationship since. But I just loved how he approached interviews. I think I don't know. I mean, like I really liked talking to him, and I think he was insightful and introspective, and I really liked that. I mean, he was one of the star players, and I felt like it was the first time where I was like, oh, like this, I can do this. Like I can get interesting information from a star player. Um, Gosh, over the years, I don't know. I mean, like, I mean, there's plenty of lesser named guys who I loved interacting with over the years. I don't know how to. Uh, Vance Worley and I were both coming into Major League Baseball at about the same age. Him and I connected quite a bit, and I really liked covering him. Uh, I, More recent, I mean, I guess Reese Hoskins. I loved covering him. I think he was a true professional. Um, who was always willing to take some time and be insightful. Uh, I loved my interactions with Zach Wheeler, uh, which might be a weird one to say, but uh, I think it's the challenge more than anything. And he's got this crusty exterior, but it's I think it's a fake, it's a false front, and I think he likes that. I'm willing to push him and kind of try to get past that wall. I love talking about pitching with Zach Wheeler. I do, and it's not all the time because a lot of time he's guarded and won't want to share what he's thinking. But I love it when he decides to share what he's thinking. Uh, and mm, I'm trying to think of who else sticks out. I mean, there's so many like, well, I'll just shout out some like role guys over the years, right? Okay, um, Andrew Knapp. I love talking baseball with Andrew Knapp, and I do think he's going to manage in the major leagues someday if he wants to. Um, Jose Alvarado. I have an Alvarado story up today on The Athletic. Um, I don't know what it is, but him and I have, even with something of a language barrier, but Alvarado's English is quite good, and I appreciate that because it's a second language, and I don't have Spanish in my back pocket, and I should, but I don't. Um, Alvarado is I don't know. Him and I have always. I feel like we have a strong relationship and have always connected. Um, Jared Eichhoff, he's now a I think he's the AAA pitching coach for the Miami Marlins.
Interesting.
Uh, yeah,
Wow, I feel
I
old.
Jared, I didn't cover Jared for very long, but I don't know. Jared's so respectful and just like also like very inquisitive and curious, and I love that. Adam Morgan is another guy who I've stayed
Oh
in
yeah.
contact with over the years. Um, I loved Adam's story because he had the kind of shoulder surgery that you are not supposed to come back from. And not only did he come back from it, he ended up coming back and, pitching in a lot of games and being overused. And probably ended, Gabe Kapler probably ended his career, but that's neither here nor there. But I don't know. There's so many guys that like, I I really do appreciate the general professionalism that this group of Phillies sets, and that starts with Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper. They're they are professional with their interactions with reporters in the clubhouse, and that does set a tone for the rest of the room. And I do say this. I mean, like people ask me, it must be like there's a lot of big personalities, a lot of older guys. It must be a tough clubhouse to cover. Like honestly, the last few years, like it's really not been a difficult group of guys to cover because they're all professional. I might not have great relationships with every single one of these guys, but they are professional and they are respectful. And I think that's, as a reporter, that's all you can ask for.
That's really cool. It's good to hear like these positive stories and like going back in Philly's history too. Like I think especially like the Kapler era is such like a mystery for so many people because of how chaotic those 2 years felt. But I'll pass it over to you, Jeremy, for what you have next.
Yeah. I don't know. Let's see. There's so many questions. Uh, yeah. It was like, what was your like your what was your favorite games that you've covered? Like, are there any like just from like the bad like the Reese Hoskin games coming up when like they were bad, but that was exciting, or like Michael Franco's like carrying us against the Yankees that one series.
There's a couple that stuck out in my head. The Vince Velasquez 16 strikeout game.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why, but it was the beginning of 2016. It was like the second week of the season. And you knew this team wasn't going to be very good. And it in retrospect, the more and more we look at it, it's like this is just an insane 9 inning baseball game for so many reasons. But at the time, it was like I don't know. It was a day game. It was in the middle of the week. It was one of those true delights, I guess, because even with time now, and God, that's going to be 10 years ago now.
Oh no.
This April, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
April 14th. It was like the second week of the season. We were
Yeah,
excited about a young pitcher who he just traded for being really good.
exactly,
He did a run for
exactly,
15 innings.
exactly. And I don't know why I said that theme, but I mean the Roy Halladay perfect game. I mean that's an easy answer, but
Oh,
I was 2 months into the beat. I am 23 years old, and it is a Saturday night in Miami Gardens, old Dolphin Stadium, and I don't think I will ever be more panicked or stressed than I was in the middle of that game because I think it dawned on me and I was like, holy shit, uh, I might have to be the one to write this story for like the newspaper of Philadelphia. And I think it started to really like play games with my mind. Uh, but it was truly, I remember everything from that night after the game. It was, I probably didn't appreciate it. I knew how special it was at the time. One of my favorite interactions, and I'll tell this story. It's a little embarrassing, but obviously, I know how special a perfect game was, and there was only so many. I think Roy's was the 19th, I think, in baseball history. And after the game, we're in the clubhouse, the visiting clubhouse at Dolphin Stadium, and Sam Perlazzo, who was, I believe, he was either the first base, I think he was the third base coach at the time for the Phillies. Uh, he's in the clubhouse, and everybody is just like blown. They just can't believe what they've seen. And I say to Sam Perlazzo, I say something like, was that the first one you've ever been involved in?" And he looks at me and just goes, "Son, what are you talking about? Of course it is." I was like, oh my God, I feel like such an idiot right now. And it's just, I remember those little things like that. I remember their video guy at the time, he's running around, he's got a handheld camcorder. I mean, this is how long ago this was. I'm really showing my age now, but he's got a handheld camcorder and he's, running around trying to capture, the scene in the post game clubhouse and all these little things. And Joe Biden is the vice president. He's on Phillies PR guy's got Joe Biden on the phone, on his cell phone to talk to Roy Halladay after the game. And it's just like all these little things. Like I'll never forget that night. I'm sure there's a, uh, there's plenty of games over the years, like insane games, like just dumb games in the regular season. I wish I had one off the top of my head. There was a game, and you're gonna have to look this up. They beat the Dodgers at home. It was in the regular season. I think it was like August, and the Phillies came from behind. They won the game like 11-10. They were down by 6 runs, maybe in the eighth inning. It was one of the best comebacks in the franchise's history. And as a beat writer, at back of the Inquirer, I have to file a game story once the game ends, right when the game ends, so that they can put it in the early edition of the newspaper back then. And at the time, I've got 2 files open because I had already written sort of like the losing game story, because they're down by 6 runs in the 8th inning. And all of a sudden, I've started a new file and I've copied some of the old file into the new file and I'm rewriting the top of it, trying to rework it. And I think I had a BlackBerry at the time, and my phone, there was something going on with my phone. Wasn't working. So I was emailing with the copy desk, back and forth, and they knew that my phone was messed up. But the game ends. The Phillies win this incredible game. I think Carlos Ruiz either had a walk off or I forget. And I
Yeah.
accidentally
I saw in
sent
the game.
I sent the wrong story. I sent the losing story, and I didn't have my cell phone. It wasn't working. And so I go down to the clubhouse thinking, oh my God, like I just covered this incredible game. And somehow somebody from the copy desk got word to another reporter and they come up to me in the clubhouse. They're like, your desk needs to talk to you. You sent them the wrong story. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, I don't know why I don't know why this popped in my head now. What year was it? 2012, 2010?
2010, August 12th, 2010. The Dodgers were winning 9-2 going into the bottom of the 8th, and we scored 4 in the 8th, 4 in the 9th. The winning pitcher for the Phillies was Danny's Baez. Broxton, of course, was the loser.
That's
Oh
great. And what,
man,
what was the what was did Ruiz have a walk-off hit? Did I have that right?
Walk-off double.
that's
Walk-off double. Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, great memory.
There's all these weird games. There was a game to me, like a game that they were at Camden Yards, and this is 2012, early in that season, and the infield is like Ty Wigginton, Mike
Oh
Fontenot,
God. Oh
uh,
God.
I forget who else, but Mike Fontenot made 3 errors in the game, and I'll never forget. I mean, it just seemed like well that okay yeah. So that later that year, the Phillies are in. No, it's 2014. The Phillies are in Detroit. This is the Steve Susdorf game. You guys remember this?
Vaguely, I think.
I mean, the
I don't
Phillies.
remember. Like I found out on
It
the
was
Phillies. I
it
was just
was
like
it
I
was
forgot about that.
it was right before the trade deadline, and everybody knew the party was over. And Cliff Lee kind of, I wouldn't say he quit. I think that's a little harsh. He woke up with a sore neck. He said he slept funny, and he could not start the game that day. So the Phillies started a guy named Raul Valdez, and uh, he gave up I think like 10 runs in the first 2 innings of the game. I mean, it was one of the worst games I think I've ever seen them play. And uh, Steve Susdorf, who was on the Phillies for like a week, dropped a routine fly ball in the outfield, and it was just, I mean, it was just everything that could go wrong went wrong. It was 2013. Yeah,
Yeah.
2013. They
Yeah.
lost 10-0. Valdez gave up 9 runs in 3 2/3 innings, and that whole weekend, like that was the weekend where they signed Miguel Alfredo Gonzalez to like this massive contract that later got edited because he was hurt, and he's since passed. And then that was also the weekend where Jonathan Papelbon told Todd Zaleski, "I didn't come here for this." And it was just, I remember the game. I remember after the game, the 10-0 game, the Valdez game. I remember looking at Charlie, and it was essentially 2 weeks before he got fired, or even like less than that. And you could just look at him, and you could tell like he was done. Like it was just you could just feel it. And I don't know that game will always stick out to me. The Steve Susdorf game, poor guy.
Well, a slight correction. They lost 10-0, but the error wasn't until the next game when they
Oh, that
lost
was the
12 to
next
4.
day. Okay. So it was
Yeah,
that whole
yeah.
weekend. Let's say like it was that whole weekend where
Yeah.
it just
10
everything.
nothing, 12 to 4. I can see why those blended together.
Yeah, it's funny. Max Scherzer started that game against Raul Valdez. That is one of the all-time mismatches.
What was it
There's
kind of
plenty
Yeah,
like?
of other
Valdez is
games.
one of
There's
those.
plenty of others. So many of these other games. I mean, there's good ones too. I guess I remember like the chaotic ones that are just so funny to me. But I don't know. Like there's, I've seen so much baseball that like I feel bad that I forget some of these things. But Um, yeah, it's. I've been really lucky. I mean, I've seen a lot of really cool things. I've seen a lot of really dumb things. I tend to remember the dumb things, I guess.
I think I'm right
Those are the
with you there.
funniest.
What was it kind of like covering like those 2012, 2013 teams where the end of an illustrious era was kind of like dying off? I'm sure it was kind of like a somber time in the clubhouse. Like I would love to know more about what it was kind of like being in the clubhouse in those years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was somber, but I think it was just there was a lot of anger, right? I mean, I think there was a lot of guys there who just felt like it didn't have to go that way, and then there was a lot of other factors that played to him. I mean, like Ryan Howard was, um, trying to force his way back from a debilitating knee injury, and Chase Utley was, I mean, really just, willing himself to just be on the field, playing through chronic knee issues. And I think you saw, a lot of guys were frustrated not by them not winning, but not by being able to physically be the guys that they once were. And I think that was a very difficult thing for not only the players, but for I think the organization, the entire franchise to kind of reconcile with. It took them longer, arguably, to reconcile with it than it should have. Um, and it was tough. I mean, I think for a lot of guys, they never felt bad for that they let Charlie Manuel down, and that Charlie's, while he's now remembered very ceremoniously as he should be, for being the manager of one of the most successful eras of Philadelphia Phillies baseball. The end was very unceremonious. I mean, it was not pretty, and I think there's a lot of guys who felt guilty about that.
Yeah, I always thought it was really ridiculous that they fired him when they were 53 and 67 2013. Like they were just let him finish the year. It was
Well, I
ridiculous.
mean, there was more to it than that. I mean, Charlie had been talking to Ruben, about 2014, and Ruben was basically like, "I can't commit to bring you back." And Charlie was basically then, "Well, if you're not gonna bring me back, then you might as well just fire me now." And they kind of got into it,
Oh
and it
wow.
was, I mean, I think that was reported. I mean, that was, Charlie was not. It was very weird because there was like the way they phrased it at the time was like they didn't fire him, but that he had been, uh, that he wasn't going to come back, and he decided that he just wasn't going to manage the rest of the year. It really was, Charlie's, he still does. He has a massive ego, and his thing was like, if you don't want me around anymore, then I'm out. Uh, and and that was a tough day. I mean, Ruben Amaro sat up there and cried, and it was not fake. I mean, that was a tough day for a lot of people there. But yeah, I mean, that was a lot of that. Not all of it, but a lot of it was Charlie saying, if you're not going to bring me back, well, then just let me go now.
What was it like when Charlie Manuel came back to the team in 2019? Like that interaction with Gabe Kapler, like must have been unbelievably interesting to be a part of. Like, was there ever a chance that Charlie Manuel could have taken over for Kapler? Like Kapler got like
No,
no.
no. And I don't know how much interaction there was between Gabe and Charlie. I mean, there was some, but I don't know. I don't know that Charlie should have been in that role at that time. I mean, I think he was excited for it, but I think a lot of that was coming at the ownership level saying, you got to do something here. And it was kind of a shot in the dark. And I get it. I mean, I think Charlie liked, you know, the chance to be in the dugout again, but um, he's had a lot of physical issues too. I mean, it's a hard job. I mean, that's the thing is like these, such late nights and the work now of the modern hitting coach. There's usually two or three assistants now that these guys have. It's like it's a lot of work. It's not just sitting there now and just telling a guy about hitting. I mean, it's so much more than that. And I think that was, for a couple months. I think it was okay, but I mean, I don't know that it wasn't the greatest situation, I would say.
That makes sense. It kind of seemed like panic at the time. What else do you have, Jeremy?
Just my one question about like the cap like what just like it's just you don't have to answer this, but like is there anything really truly like bizarre like how bad they were with the analytics with Kapler? Like there were reports they were reading. I don't remember if it was you, but like they were reading it backwards. My recollection was based. I can't remember what's his face on the Braves, who was a terrible player, but always hit against the shift on the Phillies when they were shifting against them for for some stupid reason.
I don't remember them doing it backwards. I know that like they went from 0 to 60 on the ground level with their data-driven decision making, and it was too much at the beginning because like they didn't have the proper people and processes and systems in place to pull it off. And that's why in early 2018 you just saw absolute chaos. Bad decision making, bad positioning. You had a rookie manager who, while he was well intentioned and very uh, idealistic, it didn't work the way it should work right away. And I think a lot of the players in turn were sort of turned off by how things were run and being handled. And I think it did dent into some of the stuff they were trying to do. That's not to say like I think they had some good ideas and they had some good intentions. I really do. I think it just happened too fast, too much, too fast. And there was a story that Megan Montemoro, who's my former colleague at the Athletic and is now at the Chicago Tribune, we wrote a story at the end of the year that year. Not that year. And at the end of the 2019 season, um, when the pitching coach at the time, Chris Young, the pitchers had really essentially staged a mutiny against him for these very heavy data driven plans that they were rigid, they were not flexible. Whereas now I think you see somebody like Gelb Kapler, yes, he's very much informed by data, but it's not an end all be all. I think there is some flexibility in how the Phillies game plan and what they do. With Kapler and Young at the time, it was not, it was rigid. And at the end of that season, also, though, Kapler had started going around the pitching coach and sending the pitchers his own plan uh, before a game the night before. So the pitchers were getting two things: one from the pitching coach, one from the manager, and uh, it was a mess. And obviously, Gabe and everybody was fired, and not too long after that. Um, you know, I'd like to think it would have worked out in different circumstances. I just think this was a tough place to try to pull off that experiment, and I do think that they made some real major missteps along the way, especially early in that 2018 season.
Yeah, so I looked up who it was. Ryan Flaherty hit 217 in 2018, -1 WAR against the Phillies in 13 games, 326, 835 OPS.
You can find guys like
So,
that every year. I don't know, but yes, that sounds right. I do remember that.
One last question that are there ever any stories that like in the moment you really wanted to tell but weren't able to tell in the moment that you want to tell us now, years later?
Good. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's probably hundreds, but I don't know. Nothing is coming into my head now. I don't know. Sorry, this is not exciting. I can't. I'd have to think about it. There's a
That's
lot of
okay.
Gabe stories, but a lot of them I still probably can't tell if I'm being totally honest.
That's
I
fair.
liked I liked covering Gabe Kapler a lot um, because it was different, but it was exhausting. He was uh, he was very calculated in what he said, what he did, who he talked to, who he didn't talk to. It was sort of a mind game. I feel like as a reporter, trying to decipher what he was actually saying, what he was actually intending. I think a lot of his players felt the same way too. It was not the easiest style of communication, and I think that made for a lot of paranoia. It made for a lot of confusion, and it was generally like a really interesting time to cover them. Um, but those were 2 long years. They really were.
Anything else that you have, Jeremy, before we wrap up?
yeah, how many 20 home run hitters are the Phillies going to have this year?
a good one. Harper, Schwarber, Bone, Garcia, 4. I don't know if Garcia's going to get the 20. You better. Let's say 4.
Yeah, those are who I said too.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
If there's 4, I'll take it. There were only 2 last year, which I think surprised a lot of people at the time. So I would take that.
I think the over-under is 3.5.
Here's one more, actually, 2026 Phillies question. Do you think it's more likely that the Phillies finish the season with a bye or that they miss the playoffs altogether?
More likely that they finish with a bye.
Cool. I will take that too.
But it's yeah. I think them winning the division has a higher probability than them missing the playoffs altogether. Yes.
Yeah, I
Nice.
agree with
I think
expected playoffs.
I think likely they end up in the middle of that. Is like I believe that they're like probably the wild card one with like 89 or 90 wins, but also would not be surprised if they win the division with like 93 wins or 94 wins.
Nice. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today. This was great to have you.
I'm sorry I
Thank
sound
you.
like shit, but thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
And do you want to plug your podcast you have a little bit here?
Yeah. Obviously you can read my work at the Athletic, and I do really appreciate. I know on Reddit on the Phillies channel, like I know you guys are citing my work a lot, and there's a lot of subscribers, and I do really appreciate you guys. That means a lot, and um, podcast form, with Paul, we do Phillies therapy, and we're having a lot of fun with it. And it's been really cool to see the community, Joe. That you've become part of like the Discord that we have, and the people. Like it means a lot. I mean, like I think for Paul and I mean, this is just kind of like it's a side thing for me, and it's sort of like a hobby for Paul. Paul is a full time other job, and it's just been really cool. Like I love doing the show with him. It doesn't feel like work. It's a lot of fun. I just like talking baseball with him, and it's been cool to see how many people really enjoy and listen to the podcast, and have created a community around it, and that means a lot. It's really neat to see.
Awesome. I definitely am a big fan of Phillies therapy. I think that's my most expensive subscription since I have like the highest Patreon tier.
Well,
But
we appreciate that. You didn't have to do that, but
no,
thank you.
it's worth it. It's really worth it in my opinion. And I think it's a really great podcast for Phillies fans to listen to. Like reasoned discussion. And I just think it's a great thing that you guys have going. So thank you again for joining, Matt. Thank you, Jeremy, for taking part of this as well. And we'll talk to you all soon.
This is amazing. Bye.
Thank you, guys.